Okay, look, I know it's still 2022, but I gotta start getting out in front of these things since now it looks like the PlayStation 4 is actually gonna be relevant into 2023. That's right, 10 years after it released, it looks like it's still getting games, especially from third parties, and I wouldn't be shocked if Sony made some announcements here in a bit that they will have games coming to this system from a first party perspective. Today though, what I wanted to do was take this PlayStation 4 that I've had for quite a while actually, where I got it off of Craigslist and fixed the HDMI port, run all kinds of tests and well, we'll say put it through its paces. I wanted to completely refurbish it, make it look new, and give it to someone who I think will get a kick out of it. Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So if you haven't noticed, the case itself is kind of beaten up. It's got a lot of marks on it that don't come off when you clean it up with basic like soap and water or something. It has dents, scratches, and it's just overall been beaten up pretty well. So I decided, you know what, if we're gonna do it, you gotta do it right. I actually found an entire new case for the PlayStation 4 online. I couldn't believe it, but yeah, this is for the original system. This one in particular is from 2014, at least that's what the manufacturing on the back says, September 2014. So not quite a launch model, but still, it's pretty old. Finding a case though for it like this, where it has like plastic wrap around that glossy panel here, and I'm checking it out, it has no massive scratches really at all on it, still has that nice piano black finish that does still annoy me to see because the glossy part is what gets torn up pretty quickly, but like everything else looks, I mean, mint. So I'm pretty excited to dress it up in some new plastics. I also have a lot of extra screws for the PlayStation 4, so I have a nice little pile of extras here. I should be able to pretty much fill up the entirety of this with all of the standard screws and everything, so I won't have anything missing there. So now I have to start just taking this apart. While I'm doing that, I kind of want to talk about exactly who this is for, and I guess we have to start with what I call the hand-me-down system. And this is something that I'm sure a lot of people have experience with, that myself included. Going back to the original Nintendo, this is essentially when you're younger, you may have an older sibling, an uncle, or whoever, who maybe is moving on to the next big system, or maybe is just getting out of gaming completely, and they either give you that system that, yeah, maybe a generation behind, but to you, it's brand new. And that happened to me with the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo. Back then, I was a Genesis kid, but I did really like my original Nintendo, and a lot of that had to do with my uncle giving it to me. But then the Super Nintendo came around, and my cousin was moving on to the Ultra 64 at the time, or the Nintendo 64 is what it released as. They had the PlayStation, but they knew this was coming out. There were so many talks about it. So they decided they would sell me their Super Nintendo with like 8 games, 2 controllers. It was like 50 bucks. So I got the family discount, I guess. But even though everyone was talking about the Ultra 64, I couldn't get enough of this Super Nintendo. I mean, the library was massive. And when I went to the rental store, it was like an entire section of the store unlocked to me completely, and I'm sitting there looking at all the Mega Man X's, the Chrono Triggers, the Earthbounds. It was just incredible stuff. Yeah, we can see the fan definitely needs to be cleaned up a bit, but I can pull that out of there and just run a brush through it. So who exactly is this system gonna be for? Well, I actually have a younger nephew who started with the original Nintendo and the original PlayStation, worked their way up to the Super Nintendo, now has a Switch, but they're still on that original PlayStation. I said, hey, let's get them the current PlayStation system, you know, the one that's definitely gonna be going into 2023 now, the OG PS4. And they're not even getting the PS4 Pro, they're getting the original, the OG PS4, because nothing says hand-me-down system like the launch version of it. You know, I'm curious how many people expected the PlayStation 4 to be a 10-year system back when it first released. I know we just got off of a long generation with the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, but the fact that the PS4 Pro came out in 2016, so 3 years later, I think there were a lot of people expecting Sony to then move to the PlayStation 5, potentially 2 or 3 years after that Pro. But here we are now with the PS5 existing and the PS4 still needing to be relevant to some degree, because the PS5 is impossible to get for a lot of people, which is pretty much forced Sony to take a different approach to the cross-gen side of things from the first party, where God of War will be on the PlayStation 4. I mean, Horizon Forbidden West also on the PS4, Gran Turismo. So it's not something we're necessarily used to from Sony, but the fact that God of War is probably coming out towards the end of this year, and then it'll also be supported into 2023, well, there you go. Sony's first party still working on a system from 2013. Not that that's really a bad thing, but it is certainly a controversial thing, considering there is belief that these games are being held back because it still has to accommodate this older system. I guess it kind of depends on your situation. Like if you have a PS5 right now, you might be in the camp of they need to move on. But if you don't and you're having a hard time finding it and you're using the PS4, you're probably like, hey, keep those first party games coming because I can't get them otherwise. All right, the motherboard looks pretty good because I already ran a brush around it when I had taken it apart before. I still have the compound on there that looks pretty good. So not a lot has to be done to the board. HDMI port's still holding up very, very well after I had replaced it. So it's mostly gonna be about me cleaning some of this up. I also have to look in the drive itself to make sure that the rollers are pretty clean. And then we also have to take a look at the hard drive. Your number one source of just dust buildup is gonna be right here because that's on the opposite side of the fan. That's where a lot of the air and dust and dirt will be pulled in and pushed around, which obviously we can see there. And then we also have our heatsink back here that I did remember cleaning a little bit. I ran like a brush over that. Just a few smaller screws and the heatsink itself pops out. There's a dust bunny. Look at that. We'll go ahead and clean that one out. That's certainly something that would cause a pretty loud fan when you're playing a game. So if you are getting a loud fan, even in like this original PlayStation, just pull this whole piece out, take a look at the heatsink, because even though it may look clean on this side, you might still have a pretty large chunk of dust on the other. And there we go. After a dry brush and a sort of a damp cloth, just kind of cleaning off the side here, the fan looks much, much better. I also ran this under some soap and water, cleaned it up and let it dry. So this also looks way cleaner now. You also want to take a look at your power supply. Just make sure you can kind of see through it and there's no massive blockage in here because the air does exit through the power supply to the back. Let's also talk about the disk drive very, very quickly. I noticed with this one that it was pulling in the disk, but it wasn't exactly grabbing it that well. So what I want to do is just double check these rollers here to make sure there's nothing either tangled in them or that they're just dirty. There we go. These are a little dirty. That generally some dust will build up on them. They're supposed to have like kind of a texture to it so that it's able to grab the disc itself and just slowly pull it into place. You'll also have this felt on the front that you can already see is building up with a lot of dust on it. And that can sort of stiffen this up and make it so that the disc has a hard time sliding through here. So I'm just gonna clean this up very gently and then also just sort of run some alcohol and just cleaning this up generally to make sure there's no extra dust on it. And now at this point, it's up to me just reinstalling the fan, getting the motherboard back into place, and then we can check out this new shell. Yeah, it looks a lot cleaner now. It's pretty impressive what just some basic soap and water on these plastics can do after disassembly. All right, it is coming together very nicely here. We're gonna grab the first bit of this shell that I ordered. And wow, take a look at that. That is a clean shell for this PlayStation 4. It looks really, really good all the way around. It's gonna drop right on here. There we go. Now we just need a couple of screws here that go through that top case. Ooh, check this out. The bottom also looks brand new, but check this out. There's this spot right here. And they included like the sticker that you'd put there that has some of the information for Sony. I think it's, yeah, this is different a bit. It just says Sony PlayStation 4, doesn't have all the extra information on it. There we go, look at that. That looks really nice, has that stock look to it. Oh, and check it out, it came with a bunch of the warranty stickers that Sony would put on the back here. Again, to sort of just complete the overall refurbishment process, so that way you know if people have been inside the system, if you want to put a warranty on it from your specific store. I mean, I guess I'll drop them on there just to complete the look. First though, we do need to discuss the hard drive because this is the original drive that came with the system in 2014. So it's almost 8 years old. You can see the capacity, 500 gigabytes, 5,400 RPM, which what we know now with different tests for an SSD, not a large benefit because it's using a SATA 2 connection. Sure, some of the random read writes are gonna be a bit faster, so a second or two off of load times, but because of that bottleneck that exists with this original PlayStation 4, you might as well go for size over everything, and that's what I'm doing here. We're gonna replace this with this 2 terabyte Western Digital drive. And I think I've shown this process a couple of times here on the channel. It's very simple. 4 screws around the edges, all Phillips head. Take the old hard drive out, put the new one in the same orientation that it has here, which you can just look at the SATA connection just to make sure it's lined up, and then you just drop it in the PS4. All right, that's in there. This just slides in, pushes in there. We do have the PlayStation screw that has all the symbols on it. That's just gonna screw in right here to hold it down, and I think we're ready for our cover, which is the part of the system that I was never fond of. The glossy black plastic always got scratched up. The rest of the system would generally be able to at least absorb some beating, not this. Even dust would just scratch it up. Whenever I saw it come in on trade-in, it just had lines all over it. Either way though, we can drop it on here. This does look pretty nice, so I'll take the plastic off and then just start letting it get scratched up just randomly. Take that off, and yeah, that does look really, really nice for now. We'll give it a little bit of time, and I'm sure this will start absorbing a lot of scratches. Maybe I'll put that plastic back on for when it's in transit, but at least for now, this does look like a brand new PlayStation 4 system. So everything looks good. Because the drive they put in there is brand new, it does have to go through like the initialization process where you have to get a USB stick, download the file off of their website and all of this. But that should go through fine, and then I guess I can pop a game in to make sure it reads and all of that. Okay, everything looks good. Went through the installation process, no problem. Connected to the internet, set the time. But I understand fully, this is probably going to end up being a Fortnite box. Like I get what a lot of the kids are playing, but I am gonna attempt to class this up a little bit for the younger nephew, and I'm gonna make sure he gets a game that is age appropriate, of course. That's why we're going with Mortal Kombat 11. I'm just kidding. Spider-Man, one of my favorite games from this generation that once again is a bit more age appropriate. I still need to test the disk drive, of course, so we'll go ahead and pop this in. And there we go, Spider-Man, reading fine, it's loading up, has to install before we can do much. I'm gonna do some tests with this though over the next couple of days before I do hand it off to the nephew, just to make sure it's perfectly fine. But that's pretty much it here for a fully refurbished PlayStation 4, ready for 2023, which let me know what you think about the cross-gen stuff right now, with this system actually going longer than I think a lot of people were expecting. And let me know if you were someone who remembers getting like a hand-me-down system, and even though it was a bit older at the time and people were moving on to the new system, was it really exciting to have a whole new generation for you technically to take a look at? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.